7.7 is not current. The number I have from central bank is over $12 billion from around 6 billion 3 years ago. So the months of import cover is over 5 months, when we had below 4 months in 2022. Then we have had a stable shilling. And I think it's one of the things I'm very proud myself, because in 2024, we were able to deal with the fear that we were not likely to settle maturing $2 billion for Eurobond. But we were able to go to market. We issued and bought back 1.5 billion of the 2 billion. That was a decisive action. If you can go to the next slide. You can see that from, like this, okay. You can see that from February 2024, the shilling has stabilized at around 129. And this is at a time when initially, before that, we had a lot of challenges. In fact, most oil marketers had challenges even opening foreign exchange. If you wanted to import, you had to open up to 20 commercial banks to get foreign exchange. But now, because of the stable shilling, reserves have increased. In fact, this shilling would have been stronger if we were not accumulating foreign exchange reserves. So we have had a stable shilling. Next slide. And then our capital market has performed very well. You can see that 50% profit. Well, you can see that 50% profit. And so, honorable members, I hope I can move by the next issue of the budget, but by saying that we have achieved good progress on the macroeconomic front. Inflation has come. It is now low and stable. That inflation has been translated into low interest rates. The low interest rates have meant that now banks are able to lower the interest rates, and also the rates we pay when we borrow have come down. So we have saved also in terms of cost of borrowing. And then you can see that also the shilling has stabilized, and then our capital market is performing well. And this is why it's the right time also to go into the market when it comes to even divestiture, because we will optimize on the value. So I thought I should just tell you where we are on the budget. And I will give you how we have performed in the first half of year up to December last year. We have a revenue underperformance of about 136 billion. 136 billion. And I will show you in the next slide, if you can go, I'll come back to the next slide. This is how we have performed. In July, we failed to collect about 17 billion. Then it went to 69, 90, 108, then 120, almost 130. But December did well. The Kenya Revenue Authority surpassed its target. And that is why it has come down to 115. This is what we call ordinary revenue, what KRA collects and gives to Exchequer. But if you go back to the next slide, 136 includes total revenue, meaning ordinary revenue plus appropriation in aid, which is what you see there. So you can see that almost all the tax categories underperformed. And therefore, because of that underperformance, and you can see the expenditure also, if you can go to the next slide. Next slide. This is how we have done on the expenditures. Our target was for December 2 trillion and 2.097 trillion. But we performed 2.024. So expenditure was still high, despite even the problem of EGP not being available. But we still have done well, and because also we were able to release Exchequer, most of the entities, I believe even including Parliament, has been able to receive most of the requirements that you need, including your CDF, which we have been very proactive to make sure that we pay as and when required. So, what is the storyline here? We are saying that expenditure pressures are high, revenues have underperformed. And this is why we have to readjust the budget, and therefore next week we are preparing to go to Cabinet, and we will be back to Parliament with a supplementary budget. We will submit together with the BPS so that you consider that adjustment. So this is how we have ended up with the performance in terms of deficit. The deficit financing has been around 517. That is billion. So if you annualize, you can see that we are likely to go beyond the target that we had aimed at. So this is why, because of this performance, we want to come back to Parliament to make adjustments to make sure that we move on with the fiscal consolidation exercise that we have been pursuing. Next slide. So I thought I should tell you that as we are implementing the budget, our challenge has been revenue shortfalls. We have also had challenges with the settlement of pending and newly negotiated CBS for public sector employees. We have also had an additional expenditure requests. In fact, you will see in the supplementary, we have a lot of requests from public sector, but we cannot accommodate given the fiscal space. Then we now have emergency response, not just the floods that we had last time, now we have drought. And this drought is heavy, so we have had to readjust the budget to also make sure that we provide enough money for intervention. So far, I think we have intervened to the tune of about 9 billion to support the relevant ministries. Next slide. So this is a budget that is for 2026-27. And you can see we have targeted revenue, total revenues is about 3.5 trillion. And expenditure is about 4.65 trillion. We are targeting a 5.3% deficit, which is about 1.1 billion. This explains why, and I will come back to show you the accumulation of debt, because this deficit now means we are going to that 1.1 adding to the stock of debt, and that becomes a challenge. And this is why we are working on it very hard to make sure we raise revenue and we manage expenditure. Next slide. If I can show you, this is what we expect to be available for ministries in 2026-27. We expect 2.8 trillion. But remember, the budget, the expenditure was 4.6. If someone can work out the figure, 4.6 minus 2.8, that's 1.8. Where has that gone? That money, 1.8, is going to be used to pay debt, interest payments for export, external, and domestic debt, together with what we call CFS items like pensions. So we remove 1.8 from 4.6. So we have this 2.8. How have we distributed? You can see that the education sector is now taking 27%. And this is the largest chunk in terms of a share of what we are bringing as budget. But you also know that the education sector is not fully funded. There are issues around capitation that is not fully accommodated, issues around scholarship and the rest. But this is the situation. Our energy and infrastructure and ICT takes around 595 billion. We think that if we set up the infrastructure fund and we are able to take off part of this 595 for what is commercially viable, then we could still create some fiscal space here while using the infrastructure fund, which I'll come back to later, to address some of this by scaling up private financing together with what we have in the fund so that we address this. These are innovative ways to deal with the tightening fiscal space. Public administration, you can see, is 12.3%. Governance, justice, law and order, it takes about 11.5%. The security sector has also grown very fast and is now about number 5 in terms of share of allocation. And I think the rest are there. We are trying to adopt zero-based budgeting as we come up with this budget. So this is likely to come before you in the BPS. I don't know if you can see. I think this presentation will be given to you. Next slide, please. So I want to make one point, because this is the point we are making so that Kenyans understand also why even we have to come up with innovative ways. We have a shrinking fiscal space. That's our message. And it is important that members of parliament who approve our budget understand this situation. If you look at the history, in 2013, tax as percent of GDP was 17.2. And then it went to 18.2 around 2014. Then from then on, it has declined as a percent of GDP. Now we are talking around 14.4. But I'll show you that out of our fiscal consolidation measures, we are trying to reverse this trend. So ordinary revenue as percent of GDP has been declining. And this is attributed to a number of factors, including compliance gaps by many of the people who are not able to pay the taxes. We are pushing KRA to close that gap. We have also given a lot of expenditure, tax expenditure, too many incentives. I think cumulatively around 500 billion that we have given as incentive to various sectors. Then there are sectors like agriculture, which take a huge chunk, about 22% of GDP, but contribute very little to the tax. And so if you look at this, just go to the next slide. Revenues continue to rise each year, but at a slow pace. This highlights the need to strengthen revenue mobilization and then improve collection. So it looks good. You can see that the green slide is improving. But what is the growth rate? Look at that line, the red line. It's showing that the growth rate is slowing. That's point number 1 on the revenue side. Please go to the next slide. How are we spending when we get exchequer? And this is important, members of parliament, that you take note that for what we get from Kenya Revenue Authority, the situation has changed such that by the fiscal year 2025-26, we allocated 48.5% of ordinary revenue to be for CFS. This is high compared to 16.4% 10 years ago. So if 10 years ago we were paying 16.4% ordinary revenue for CFS, now we are doing 48.5%. If we continue with this trend in the next 10 years, assuming we don't do anything, it means we will just be collecting to pay for debt. And this is why we have been really working around it to see how to manage debt and see how to look at ways to get some things off budget so that we don't accumulate more debt. And then another point is that the share of development budget has shrunk. We had 20.8, in fact, 2016, 2017, we had about 28% of allocation going to the development budget. Now it has come to almost 11.2%. It has shrunk. This is what I mean by tight, shrinking fiscal space. And maybe we look at recurrent, and look at the recurrent spending. Who takes the lion's share of recurrent spending? You can see, I mean, for total spending, you can see that recurrent expenditure has grown. It's now almost 17.5% of GDP. Then development is quite low, as you can see. But total expenditures, we're talking about 23.5%. So you can see 23.5% of GDP expenditure side. On the revenue side, you're talking about 14. But now we are trying to close that. So expenditure has remained elevated in recent years, reflecting sustained government spending pressures despite efforts we are making on fiscal consolidation. Let's go to the next slide. We are looking at the medium-term outlook. Thank you very much for supporting us. And I want to say this on behalf of my colleagues at National Treasury. Parliament has been very useful. You have responded to a number of reforms. We bring bills, and you have done very well in passing them around. To the extent, even sometimes I think you had issues. The Gen Z moment came because we were bringing in this problem. We wanted to raise additional revenue. You can see the shrinking space. So we have a national tax policy, and we have a medium-term revenue strategy. Out of this policy and revenue strategy, we are focusing on simplifying and harmonizing tax laws. In fact, our desire is that if the situation can improve, we want to make sure that the tax rates are adjusted downwards. Like VAT should come from 16 to 15. Even income tax can be addressed. We are looking at all this because that's our desire. The challenge is when you adjust downwards and you don't get a corresponding expansion on the tax base. Yet on this other side of expenditure, everybody wants money for roads, for water. And I know you go to your constituencies, everybody is asking for resources here and there. So we must also discuss the revenue side. And so we are looking at deepening tax administration. In fact, yesterday we had a high-level meeting with KRA trying to see how best KRA can do to collect more. And also scaling up non-tax revenues. But we have to be innovative to see that we also look at things that do not have to require that we rely on taxation, which is why we have, I'm coming back to the issue of infrastructure fund and others. So, honorable members, the next slide shows where we have come and where we want to go. On the right side is where we are aiming to go with the reforms that I've indicated: national tax policy, medium-term revenue strategy, and all the measures to increase the revenues. We want to reverse the declining trend. And this is our fiscal consolidation effort. If you can move the next slide. So how are we doing on the expenditure side? you may have seen, and this could be reflected in the budget, we try to rationalize and reduce what we call non-essential expenditures. But sometimes it's very difficult to convince someone that travel is not essential. Because sometimes yourselves, you have to travel abroad. But it's a candidate for budget cut when it comes to travel or training. But training is important for our staff. We must continuously train. So it becomes very difficult sometimes to say, what is it that is non-essential in the budget? But we believe that there is still a lot of room in our budget that we can deal and actually make it efficient. So we need to create efficient expenditures by doing proper prioritization of ongoing projects. We should not start new projects before we complete existing. And this has been our desire, that we really clear backlogs. We have also tried to limit what we call year-in adjustments to the budget. But it has been very difficult. This is why we are coming back to you in even before end of the year. We would have loved you do one budget, we implement, we bring the next budget without coming to Parliament for supplementary. But the realities of the day require that we have to come. Because if the initial plan is not going the way you wanted, it requires that we come back to Parliament to seek your permission to make adjustments on the budget. We have also implemented reforms like e-procurement. You all know we have had challenges with e-procurement. But the desire of e-procurement was that we need to move everything on e-procurement. Best practice has shown that if we are all on e-procurement, potentially we can save between 10 to 20% of our expenditure through procurable items. And it is still our desire that despite the setback that we have had in implementing the e-procurement, we still want to push so that we derive the benefits. Procurable item on our budget is around maybe about 2.5 trillion. So if we can save 10% of 2.5 trillion, that's 250 billion. That's very good money. Then we are using now PPPs. Instead of coming back, any commercially viable project, we use PPP option. That's why on this expressway to Nakuru, we opted, instead of allocating in the budget, we allow a PPP. We have a company that comes in, gets a concession hearing for 30 years, makes use of the road, and I think that is a better way. We are also trying to clean up the payroll system. So we are linking up the hatcheries, because there has been some cases where maybe we don't have clean data on who we are paying. So we have now linked what we call hatcheries, human resource system, with IFMIS and with iTax, and even with the central bank system. Then we are doing a lot of ongoing digitization and re-engineering of the pension scheme. In fact, no pensioner now can be paid if you are not registered online and with biometric. And we are going to, and we have locked out those who have not registered. And the pension department is already pointing out that there are savings from that reform. Next slide. We have also moved away from cash basis to accrual accounting. So from last year, our accounts now reflect accrual accounting, not cash basis. And we will not be seeing things like pending bills in the future, which are not declared in our books. Because we have, you all know, we have a pending bills verification committee now going on. It has completed its work. So far, out of the 606 billion that were given to them to verify, they have managed to recommend about 255 billion for payment. Out of that 255 billion, 80 billion is being cleared by the roads ministry. So the balance of 155 is what we will be, about 175 is what will be coming to you to pay. But going forward, all those pending bills will be reflected in our books. We are pursuing zero-based budgeting to make sure that we orient the budgeting and the expenditure framework, so that we don't have incremental budgeting where you have a project last year that received 10 million, it gets 11 million without checking really whether it is necessary to do that. We are also very good now at single treasury account. We have now seen visibility. We can now see where our accounts are with SAGAs. And we need to report to you that this week, actually 2 days ago, I chaired a meeting that brought in the controller of budget, the Auditor General's office, Central Bank, and we are going live on, for instance, payment of debt, external payment of debt. We have been doing a number of manual things. We are now going. In fact, myself, I've been signing payment vouchers, so many of them every week. Now we have a system that requires that we just approve a schedule of payments as an accounting officer, and then it goes through the electronically from what we call Meridian system at the debt management office to IFMIS, from IFMIS to central bank system, and that should be seamless. And I can tell you, we are going to be saving a lot. Number two, we have done something called twinning in the release of our exchequer. If you are seeking for exchequer as an accounting officer, you indicate what you require. If it is 20 items, we know which items they are by name. We will pay you, and you have no permission to change what we have given you to pay another person or another entity, which you did not provide to us in Treasury. This has really helped. We have seen a lot of efficiency in this, and we hope this can also go to counties. So you have to make your decision as accounting officer who you want to pay. Once it comes to Treasury, we release the money based on what you asked, and no one should change. So there's a lot of reforms that we are making, and even assets and inventory management. We have not been having, in fact, if you look at the Auditor General's report every year, and it comes to Parliament, members of PSC, one question that has been asked all the time is, you don't have a register, asset register, and year in, year out. Now we have said, this is a thing of the, everybody must have an asset register, and we have an inventory management module in IFMIS. And there's very good progress, and I expect that there will be less questions from the Auditor General. So, members, I want to summarize on this issue of expenditure and revenues by looking at this chart. We are looking at budget deficit. This is a graph of budget deficit. The green line and the red line. We are showing that there was a time that budget deficit had gone to 8.3% over the last 10 years. And we are saying we want to reverse it through fiscal consolidation by making sure that we aspire a situation where we can balance our budget over the medium term to avoid further accumulation of debt. Because if we can manage revenues and expenditures, then we don't need to take debt. There are countries, many countries that have managed to do that. They are doing a surplus where they raise enough revenue, more than what they require for spending, and they are able therefore to do many things, even lend to us. A lot of what we borrow are savings of other countries. That should be the aspiration of our country. And therefore, this is, you can see we have made a lot of effort in fiscal consolidation. I know those who are following may not understand, but when I say budget deficit as percent of GDP declining, that means you are increasing, you are improving your revenues more than expenditure, so you are lessening the deficit. And therefore, you can see the trend has been good in the last 4 years, 6.2, then we went to 5.6, 5.3, but because of the challenges we had with the Gen Z moment last year, Mr. Speaker, sir, it was an issue because it affected our budgeting and everything, and you can see we missed the target. We went to 5.9. And now we are picking up again. You will see what is coming up. We want to go from 5.9 all the way to 2.9%. We cannot reach here if we cannot eliminate some things from our budget that can then reduce the spending. So, next slide. This is a story of public debt. And it's good to appreciate how our debt has been. Before 2014, and I want you to pay attention to that, our country was rated, we were rated a country of low risk of debt distress. And our current capacity of debt was high. And this is because, I would say maybe because we had not adopted a new constitution. Because with the adoption of a new constitution, you can see spending pressures. You have a bicameral parliament, a Senate, National Assembly, a judiciary, independent officers, and the rest. And many things which are in the constitution which are free education, free health, many rights. These have meant that we have spending pressures that have gone beyond our capacity to finance. So 2018, 4 years later, we were rated a country of moderate risk of debt distress. Remember, it was low risk. 2018, it is moderate. By 2020, we were rated a country of high risk of debt default. So, if you continue beyond this level, it means you are likely to default. And by the way, Kenya was among 6 countries that were candidates for debt default. I'm happy to report that because of the actions we have taken, Kenya survived. All the other 5 have actually had to do debt restructuring. And we have managed to do this because of a number of actions that we have taken. So you can see that in the last 2-3 years, we have tried to stabilize so budget as percent of GDP has declined. It had reached around 68. Now it's around 64%. So I was building the basis for why we require to do reforms as I finish, because I think my time could be up. Honorable members, we have to do certain things. One of them is that we have to look at our reforms. So let's go to the next slide. Yes. We did an assessment as National Treasury on what we call, we wanted to determine the viability of our state corporations. And we identified critical gaps and a number of vulnerabilities. So we said, how do we deal with this? We went to Cabinet last year, January, to get approval to undertake reforms of our state corporations to enhance governance and accountability. So in we were targeting operational and financial inefficiencies, and then governance and service delivery, and the need to remove some entities from relying on exchequer, because it's possible for them to actually survive without exchequer funding. So we recommended for mergers, for dissolutions, for restructuring, and declassification. Next slide. So we got approval from Cabinet that we do a merger of 42 state corporations to 20 of them to improve operational efficiency and eliminate redundancies. And this is ongoing. We also have 25 state corporations which need to be dissolved, and their functions transferred back to the parent ministries because they don't need to exist on their own. There are 6 corporations that we say their mandate to be aligned to improve better performance. And then we declassified 4 public funds, which are currently categorized as state corporations, and then transfer them back. And then 13 professional bodies, which have been put as parastatals, we say they need to be out of the budget. So this is a reform going on, and we want to see that we conclude most of this year. Next slide. We thank you, Parliament, for enacting the Government-Owned Enterprise Act, because this GOE is one that is now trying to reorganize all commercially viable state corporations. And you can see here there are 54 of them. In fact, I've seen the list as we were just reclassifying. It may go even up to 80 something, about 80 something. But we have state corporations which are 244, performing executive functions, others are doing regulatory functions, others are research institutions, others are referral hospitals and public universities and colleges. Then we have what we call government-linked entities like Safaricom, like Kenya Airways, and others that we have shareholding like Uchumi. And then we are members of international bodies. So out of that, you'll see with Kenya Power, for instance, what we did was we asked that we conform to SOE. And there was an election of new directors where the board has independent directors, not government being too present in the boards. And even the chairman going forward will be appointed. So I think the CSR is in the process of issuing a circular to implement the GOE Act. And this is also going to make a lot of changes. And then privatization. We have also undertaken privatization. We came in here to bring you the Privatization Act, which you have approved. And now the commission, the Privatization Authority, is actually working on a plan, privatization plan for the next few years, including now ongoing Kenya pipeline. And I really don't want to indicate the benefits of privatization. I think most of you would know. Let me go to the next slide. Which is now the Infrastructure Fund and the Sovereign Wealth Fund. If some of you read the Kwanza Manifesto, that manifesto says that there shall be an infrastructure bank. In fact, it says an infrastructure fund will be established with initial capitalization from privatization proceeds, with a view to progressively reducing the financing of commercially viable infrastructure projects from the budget. So the key role of the fund is to mobilize long-term financing for major projects. So in the water, roads, energy, all of them that are commercially viable are candidates for being supported through the fund rather than the budget. And then we can create a fiscal space to support probably more on the education sector and others. Next slide. So we got approval from Cabinet for National Infrastructure Fund, and we have said also we need to create a Sovereign Wealth Fund. This Sovereign Wealth Fund is important, and I'll come back to it on what it's going to be doing. But the fund has been established as a limited liability company. But we are now going through public participation in Parliament, because we brought it before you, and I know the chair of the Finance Committee and others have been through this. We know that Parliament will also give its input into this process, and to make sure that we have an institution that works. So through domestic resource mobilization, we want to monetize mature public assets to raise funding. We also want to democratize the ownership of our assets by allowing more Kenyans to own through the capital markets, and then deploy national savings appropriately. So let's go to the next slide. So we expect the fund to do the following. First, project financing. This fund will be dedicated to be a staple pool of fiscal resources that will support long-term financing of projects. Now every ministry is going through, we are going through pipeline of projects. Ministry of Roads, Water, Energy. Then we go through a process to determine what is it that is, which ones are candidates for support by the fund. We all want to do a fund to attract private capital, whether local or international. In fact, by a factor of 10. So if we raise $1 billion, we can make it $10 billion. And that is not debt. We have just created a saving, got others, and then attracted them into commercially viable projects. These are proven all over the world, and there are many examples. We want to, out of this, reduce fiscal pressure, because commercially viable entities that are still dependent on the budget can be removed to be supported by this fund. Then we can also focus on investments in critical revenue-generating sectors such as transport, rail, road, and energy, for instance, and dams and others. This will also enhance our capital markets. And there is a lot of vibrancy. By the way, I think I showed you the chart. Our capital market is doing very well. And you may have had the submissions from the stakeholders in the capital market that they are very happy with this process of bringing more opportunities into the capital markets. And then we are de-risking projects. Because why carry out projects which are commercially viable through the... Why don't you allow this to be done by private sector? And then we are saying all proceeds will be ring-fenced. It's not our intention, except if necessary, to use the money to support the budget. Because you can see how that will work. We just spend, in 1 year it's gone. Because the gap is so much. We would rather ring-fence these funds, perhaps maybe a small component, if it's necessary, to handle very critical areas of support, which will still come to you anyway. But it's our intention to really ring-fence this money. Next slide. We also got approval from the cabinet to establish a sovereign wealth fund. And the cabinet approved the policy. This is a fund that is supposed to prudently manage revenues from minerals and petroleum resources, even our dividends from public investments, and even what we get from privatization can also be part of this. We are anchoring this on what we call generational savings. You can see the debt, for instance. Debt has increased in just 10 years to where we are considered unsustainable. What are we doing to the future generations? How are we responsible to the future generation? They will be saying we made life difficult for them. And I think this is a proactive measure to try and see this. So this fund establishes a comprehensive framework for prudent management and investment of revenues from our mineral resources. And it has 3 objectives. One is that if we have shocks, we can use that money to intervene. Like now we have drought. That 9 billion that we have used could easily come from such a fund because it has shocked the economy. Then you can also use a portion of this to support priority projects through the infrastructure fund. But lastly, intergenerational savings. We make sure that we preserve part of the resource wealth for the benefit of the future generations. So we ensure that the depletion of natural resources does not compromise long-term prosperity. So the objectives of the fund are, I think it's before you have already that bill, so I don't need to go through it. Next slide. Yes, so again, these are highlights. We are saying we'll have a stabilization component, we'll have an investment component, and we'll have a future generations component, what we call urithi component. So that we make sure, and this will come through you so that you create a regulatory framework, at least that this can govern the usage or the application of this fund. So, members, I thought this is the update we should give you on behalf of my cabinet secretary. But so that we don't blow our own trumpet, I wanted to present what others say about Kenya. First is Global Competitiveness Ranking, which was released last year in November. We were rated the top country in Africa and number 6 globally. And how did we score? We scored this because of combination of rapid, what we call structural reforms we have undertaken, institutional reforms we have undertaken, and sustained policy execution, which have made us different from our peers in the region. And then we have also done macroeconomic management. I presented to you that situation of low inflation, stable exchange rate, low interest rates, is not something you see in most countries in Africa. In fact, many are struggling with high inflation, weakening of the shilling, of their currencies, and so we've been rated well by IMD. It's called International Management Institute. The next is what we call PMI, which was released recently. Stanbic Bank, they have something, they have an index called Purchasing Managers Index, which reveals a robust turnaround on Kenya's private sector last year. The report shows that the private sector in Kenya maintained expansion, especially in November and December, overcoming earlier years because of protests that we had. The employment and purchasing power went up. So hiring by private sector hit a 6-year high. And purchasing activity increased as firms sought to build interventions. This is a reflection that economic activity is picking up. And output and sales. I also reported that business activity was supported by robust customer demand and new orders. Of course, the same report talks about outlook and risks and said despite this growth, strong growth, the report warns that rising costs could potentially fuel inflation with input price inflation accelerating. Then yesterday, you may have seen news that Moody's rating agency released a report which shows that we have been upgraded from CAA1 to B3. And they have also revised our outlook, showing that despite the challenges that are there, in their assessment, they see Kenya not likely to default because as finances are stable, they have seen our plan and they trust, and that is why there is an upgrade. Just in August last year, Standard & Poor also upgraded us. And we moved from B- to B with a stable outlook. This reflected that there is reduced near-term external liquidity risks. By the way, in 2022-23, I remember when I became the PS Treasury, I was struggling even to raise money to pay debt. Our auctions were failing. You go to the auction, you don't get enough money. The international market was closed. Today, we go to the international market, and we've been there many times to do liability management. We get more than we need. Oversubscription. In fact, if I tell you, in 2024, February, we went to settle the 2 billion maturing debt, which was causing a lot of fear. We got $6.2 billion. We were only requiring 1.5. The next time we went, we got almost 5 point something billion. We needed only 1.5. The last time we went, we got almost $7 billion when we needed only 1.5. And now the market is open. We will also be doing. I can report to you that we have done a lot of liability management. We liability managed the 2024, which was a big risk. 2027, which was too high, is now sorted. 2028 is also stabilized now. We are looking at 2031, 2032 to smoothen so that we are certain at Treasury when we plan that we can be able to pay. Not like when we were not sure at that time that we could pay 2 billion. And this is why we don't want to be in a situation where we also borrow at one go, one bullet, that you require to pay so much money in one go. We want to plan it such that it's easy for anyone coming. I would like the one who replaces me in the future to find a better situation of managing finances of the country. So the last one is Fitch rating. Fitch affirmed its rating at B- with a stable outlook. So these ratings are crucial because they help us in our borrowing cost. Like now, we have a delay in DPO from World Bank. And I want to thank you, Parliament, because you have supported us also on a number of reforms. You have passed the conflict of interest bill. You have passed the, what we call the GOE bill. You have also passed the the one for social protection, and many that are really, when you look at this is why we are being rated well. It's because of the work you have done as Parliament to pass the reforms. I still urge you to support us on the regulations that are before you so that we finish and we are able to access cheaper financing also. And then IMF is also on, and we have been able to get a lot of support. And our bilateral partners, we are doing well. I think all is well. And Honorable Speaker, I want to conclude by saying that we face a very difficult task of balancing, where we need to boost our revenues to protect critical spending in priority areas like education, like security, and meeting the heavy debt services that I have indicated, which now take almost 48%. So, because I will take up questions, Honorable Speaker, maybe I just end here and thank members for listening. I hope I have not loaded you with too much economics. I left a lot that I wanted to bring, but I just thought maybe if we have regular meetings, we could, I could have probably organized myself better than this, because it was not my plan. The way CS would present is different from how I present. Him is a politician. And by the way, I am proud of my CS. I think he has done very well, and he's able to communicate better than myself. Thank you very much.
Another round of applause for Dr. Chris Kiptoo. And PS, you have done pretty well. I can assure you we have seen non-preparedness, but this is much better. Honorable members, as had been discussed and directed by the Speaker, we will now take the presentation of Honorable Kimani Kuria. Then after that, we